Hello, this is Scott with UTAC. Just wanted to talk to you again today about a little problem I had with a 2001 Ford Explorer. Problem I had is I didn't have anybody to video this, so I actually started on it without videoing. So it's already torn apart, but I'm going to kind of start with telling you what I've done to it. We've taken the brake caliper off. Of course, the brake caliper, you see I've got it hanging up here high out of the way so that it's not stretching the hose or damaging the hose. We took the rotor off, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. And when we took the rotor off, this spindle was in bad shape. The bearing had come all to pieces. And if you'll look real close, you can see the bearing has some little nicks on it, some pretty bad places. Right in here you can see. But it's actually smooth enough now because what I did is I took some emery cloth. Right here, this is emery cloth. It's a 180 grit, and I just brushed on this like this for a while until I had it clean and polished up on the bottom and the top, and then I made sure that the bearing would fit on there, and I'll show you in just a few minutes how the bearing goes on. The bearing, I made sure the bearing slides on there very easily and smooth and goes up on this piece, and now we can be able to reassemble it. But we also had a little problem with the rotor, and I'm fixing to show you that. Okay, we're over at the counter now, and what happened is the bearing failed inside this rotor assembly, and here's the old bearing. You can see that it's actually busted wide open here. I removed it from the housing and was going to put a new one in. Well, these are supposed to be pressed in fairly tight. And when I went to put it in, I thought I was just going to set it in here first and go ahead and put it in, but look what happens. It literally just falls in and falls out. Falls in and falls out. So it's not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to fall in and out. It's supposed to go in there very tight. See, it's just falling in the hole. It should actually go in tight and have to be driven in or pressed in. But in this case, what happened is the race itself, part of the bearing, spun in this housing and ruined this housing. So we're having to replace the rotor with a new rotor. And we have a new rotor right over here in this box we purchased. We bought this one from O'Reilly Auto Parts. A little plug there for you, O'Reilly. You can see this rotor already has the race in it, so we don't have to worry about it. The race is already down inside the front there, and then of course there's also a race in the bearing and in the back here as well. So all I've got to do is install the bearings. And what I did, I was going to grease the bearings. I have a little packing machine here that's pretty nice, little handheld device, and what you do is you stick your bearing down in this, and then down in here like this, put this on top of it, and then you just gently press down as hard as you can. What I actually did is set it on the floor and put my foot on top of this and just push down pretty hard and until grease came out of the bearing itself. And then I pulled the bearing out of the housing, and it had fresh grease already pushed through it. This is a brand new bearing for the back, and I have a brand new bearing for the front as well. Here's both of them right here. They're already greased and ready to go. So we're going to assemble this in just the next step was what we'll be doing is putting this together in just a moment. Okay, now we're over here back at the workplace. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with putting the rear bearing in the rotor and putting the seal in the back of it. So if you'll follow me right down here, we will install first the bearing. You see there's the back, this is the back bearing. I'm going to put it in place, and I have greased it thoroughly here. I'll just rub a little more grease in there. Okay, now what we're going to do, I'm going to add a little more grease to it. I'd like to put some more grease in it so that it'll just have a little bit more around the bearing itself. It's all packed into the bearing itself, and it's not going to come out of it, but I just kind of like to fill in the back here just a little more. It just makes me feel better. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just like a little more grease in the bearing there. All right, that's probably enough. And what we'll do is we'll put the seal in now. That seal right there in the box, okay? Now this seal, take it out of the box, and let me wipe my hands off just a little bit here. Get some of this grease off my hands before we continue. All right, and then we put the seal in like this. There is a little seal installer for these, but you can gently tap. You just have to be kind of careful. Watch what you do, and it'll go right in there. There we go. Now, there's that seal in place. All right. Now, we're ready to install the rotor now. I'm going to wipe some of this cosmoline off of here. They put cosmoline on the back of these rotors from the factory so that they won't rust while they're in the box. And they don't put as much as they used to. They used to put a whole lot of cosmoline, and you had to use brake cleaner or something like that to take it off with. But now, not a problem. Now we'll take this rag. We'll make sure this is clean back here, this area. Back side here, and all this is clean as well. And now we're ready just to slide the rotor right onto the spindle, like so. I'm going to hold it. Now I'm going to install the outer bearing with the cone turned in so that it'll run against that bearing in a cone direction. Just kind of push it into place. We'll just kind of push a little of that grease in and around that bearing as well. And then there's a little washer. Sorry about the cut, I misplaced the washer. But anyway, I found it. Here's the washer. The washer goes on the front, right here in front of this bearing. And then we'll put the nut on next. And you're going to get 1,000 different people that's going to give you 1,000 different ways to tighten this nut and to make sure that it's on here right. But I'm fixing to show you the way that I do it, and it works. And it's no problem. We have to turn it on here. And you see I'm turning it with a pair of pliers. I'm just going to push it, bring it all the way on. Get that bearing all the way in there. I'm going to turn it in here till it's bottomed out all the way. Right there's the end of it right there. Now, I tighten it up a little bit, and I'll spin the rotor just a little bit to make sure I've got all the slack out of that bearing. I want all the slack out of it. Okay? No slack whatsoever. And then I'll back it off just a little bit. And then I'll tighten it with my hand as tight as I can get it. Just good and snug, okay? And then what I like to do is back off just a little bit. Really, you're kind of backing off, you know, just enough that you would for this castle nut, basically, is what the distance of this castle nut's what you'll do. But in this case, I don't even have to move it for the castle nut. I can just slip it on there. But you know, if I was going to do that, I could see it would be blocking right there, and I could just back it up to there. Back it up just a little bit, and so that there's a little space between this bearing and the race. Now, why do we want a little space between that bearing and that race? Because we don't want it to run right against each other, because then no grease can get between the bearing and the race. We want the grease to fill in between the bearing and the race continuously while it's running. So after we slip this castle nut cover on here so that it can't turn anymore, now we're ready to install the cotter pin. This is the cotter pin, and we will simply slide it down through here like so. Simple enough. And then we'll take and bend it. I grab the long end of it, and I like to bend this side up this way, and then bend this side up this way. And you want to kind of, you want to kind of knock it out of the way. You don't want it to be sticking out any, so just try to get it kind of squeezed against that as good as you can, so that it won't touch the dust boot that we're fixing to put on. Now we're ready to put the dust boot on. The dust boot is this component right here. Now, first thing I'm going to do, you'll notice, look at all that crud in that dust boot. I forgot to clean it out, so I'm going to do that right now, because I don't want any of that crud up in there to get in this bearing. And we're ready to put it on, the dust cover. This dust cover, we want to try not to bend it. See, you see where somebody's already had it off before. It's kind of bent. What I like to do is kind of just gently tap around the edges like this, and you can see just a gentle tap until it's all the way up, and you kind of even hear it when it stops. Now, it's all the way up there, and we're done. We got the rotor on, and we're ready now to put the caliper on. Caliper comes next. And the way I disassembled this was kind of improper, because at the point that I took it apart, I was just going to replace the rotor. But now, after taking it apart, I've discovered not only did the rotor need replacing, but also the brake pads. See the brake pads? Look how thin those little jokers are. I mean, we're talking just almost paper thin, really thin. So I ordered a new set of brake pads. We're going to put those on. So I'm going to do something kind of strange here. I'll show you. Really simple. We're going to go ahead and put this assembly on here. We're going to put this whole assembly right here back on without both pads. We only got the inner pad in there, okay? Kind of crazy, sounds like, I know, but if I just let the other one drop out, I don't care. I'm going to put this together like this and go ahead and put the back bolts in that will hold the caliper on so the caliper won't fall off of here while I'm replacing the pads. And it just goes in place right here on the back. I don't know if you can see this or not. We'll try to get the camera around here so you can see it. Let me get this started in place. Take just a moment here. Get these bolts started. Okay, there's one of them right there. That one's started. And then we'll start the other one on the back. All right, I've got them both started. Now, since I've got them started, we're going to move the camera around back right here right quick and let you just kind of see how this these two bolts that I just put in go in here. Now, you can see that this bolt here is on the bottom, and the other one goes right up here, and in this hole right here, if you can follow my finger right there. There's the other one right there. I'm going to tighten both of those up. That holds the housing on that holds the caliper in place. After I get this bolted back on, then we're going to remove the caliper by itself. And we'll do that. Let me go ahead and tighten these two bolts up right quick. I think it takes a 15 millimeter to do that because I took it apart with a 15 millimeter. Okay, now I've got the impact in my hand. I'm going to go ahead and pull this impact around here and tighten these two 15 millimeter bolts that we just saw in the video here. Let me get my socket on here. Take me just a moment to get these tight. All I'm doing is running them up with the impact, and then what we'll do is we'll take a 13 millimeter now and take these two bolts off right here. These two are just right on the back side of the caliper assembly. There's a bolt right there and a bolt right there. And I believe I can just take the bottom one off. This is pretty cool the way this works on this one. You can take this bottom bolt off. Let me get it off right quick. And I'll show you what this will do. We'll pull this bolt out right here. Can you see, if you can see that bolt right there, I'm going to pull this bolt out that I just took out right there. Now, instead of taking this bolt out at the top, we'll just swing this caliper up like this. Neat, isn't it? Just a neat little pendulum there. And we can put the two pads in right here. And then we'll let it back down. But we also have to squeeze this piston in. If you'll notice, this dual piston has got to be mashed back in because the new pads are going to be so thick that they won't go in there. Okay, this is the outer pad. This is the inner pad. If you notice, this outer pad has a little tab right here on it, a little metal tab. And the metal tab is designed so that when the brake pads wear down, that metal part right there will start touching that rotor. And when you're driving down the road without mashing the brakes, it'll make a little singing sound. When you put the brakes on, it stops because you're squeezing it and you stop the ringing of the rotor. But basically, this rubs against the rotor, makes the rotor ring going down the road, so you get a little squealing sound. Reason I know this is this side is because the other pad, if you put it on here, that singing device will be at the bottom, and at the bottom it don't work as well. At the top it has to kind of scrub is what it has to do, so it makes noise. So that's what we want. We want this. We're gonna put this pad in right here, like so. See if I can get it in here. Take me just a moment. Goes into that notch, and then that notch right there, that one's in. And then on the back, the same thing. Going right against there and into that little pad. And see, now they're ready to go in there. Now the problem we have, though, if you'll notice, look how much thicker these pads are, and that area right there is not big enough for me to let that back down over those pads. So we're going to have to push this piston back in. Now we're going to push these pistons in, but we don't want to just mash them in, because what happens is when you mash them in, is the fluid will be pushed into this hole and into this hose and all the way back up to the master cylinder. And in this particular situation, this is a 2001 Ford Explorer, and it has ABS braking. An ABS braking module, if we push this brake fluid backwards into that module, we can damage the brake module. So what we're going to do is, if you'll notice, when I pushed it down here, there's a bleeder right here. I'm going to open this bleeder screw. This put my wrench on there and just give it a little bump and open it up so that it can let fluid out. And now what I'm going to do is I will take the old, and push this back up here, and I'll take the old brake pad, put it against this piston on both sides. Then I'll take me a pair of these pliers here, get them adjusted right so I can do this, so get the distance I need. And then what we'll do is we'll just put it right in here between this, and I'm going to squeeze right here and push these two pistons in. If you'll notice, they're going in, and as they go in, brake fluid is going to drain into a pan that I have already positioned underneath this job that we're doing. Take just a moment to get this pushed in. Okay, squeeze, squeeze. All right, now we've got it mashed all the way in, and put the pliers over here. And now we're ready to close, go back around here and close this bleeder up. I don't want to leave it open because it'll get air in it. Because if you look, it's kind of residual bleeding right now. I'm just going to let it sit there a minute and kind of burp a little air out of there until it gets nothing but fluid. Should just be fluid coming out in just a minute. And we'll bleed the brake in just a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and snug it down. Just get a little bit of air out of it, that's all, because we're going to bleed the brake properly in just a few minutes. But now we should be able to get this caliper down now, because see, both the pistons are all the way in, have enough room for these brand new pads. So all I got to do now is slip that right over there and push this in place, and we're ready to put that bolt that we took out just a minute ago right back in here and tighten her up, and we are ready to go.